Hi guys, this is Taken57. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how I create my mods using 3D Studio Max and mudbox. Now for this example I'm going to be using my cut angle mod, which I've recently done, to demonstrate the workflow between the two programs and how I go about starting a mod from scratch and going all the way to a mod which is finalized and ready for deployment into the game. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get a reference model in which you can sculpt from. I'm going to use some retopology tools to try and speed up the process so that you don't have to hand sculpt every single thing. You can either use Topo Gun or wrapit or something of this sort to do the retopology. I'm going to use wrapit, which integrates directly into 3D Studio Max, and I'm going to retopologize the mesh in this manner. Now I'm going to utilize Kurt Angle's model from SmackDown vs. Raw 2007, and I'm not going to use every single thing from the object. I'm just going to use the upper body to sculpt from. If you're using older models from older games, you'd find that the models are much smaller in scale than the existing models in the current game. So if you want to scale this up to the same size as the current models, you need to scale it up by 10. So if you select export, and I'm going to save it as angle reference model, under the scale option you need to change the scale value from 1 to 10. So this will scale your object automatically to the size that you need for reference for the current game. Alright, now this model has already been scaled just to save you time, and it is ready for us to use as a reference. So the second thing you need to do now is to try and find an existing model in the PC version of the game which has a very similar facial structure in terms of the positioning of the eyes, the nose and the mouth. Now there isn't a very quick method in which you can do this. This is mainly trial and error. You've got to go through quite a few different models before you find one that matches. So for this example I found that using the Rick Rude model was actually a fairly good match, because there wasn't too much of stuff that needed to be moved around on the face to make it match the reference model. That being said, however, you can use any model you want, just that if you have a model which has a face which differs very vastly from the reference model, it will take you much longer to sculpt. Alright, so now that I have the reference model in place, I'm going to import the Rick Rude model, which I've already done just to save some time, and I'm just going to hide the angle reference model. So I've got the upper body for Rick Rude already imported. So now that we have the model in place, we need to position the reference model above this to try and align the models. Now for me, I find that the best way to do this is to look at one of the orthographic views and to try and align the body and the shoulders to match the reference model rather than trying to align the head. So if you look here, I try and align the chest and the arms to the cut angle reference model, like so, and then thereafter I try and position the head accordingly. Now if you look at the orthographic model, you'll see that the eyes and the nose and the mouth, etc., are not positioned 100%. So you need to move the head around to try and get it as close to position as possible. So we can go back to our 3D mesh view, like so. Turn off the reference model, and we select the head object. I can select the vertex view, and I like to use the soft selection tool when selecting vertices, so that it also does the movements of the objects fairly smoothly, and it will move the neck area as well in addition to the head. Alright, so I have selected about there. I'll just select the chin as well, like so, and I'll just adjust the fall off value so that we don't move the entire shoulder area, we just want to move the neck area. So about there should be okay. Let's check the back. Okay, a little bit less. Cool. So now we can position the neck and the head to try and match the reference model. So we go back to our orthographic view, like there. We turn on the reference model again, and you can move this to try and match the positioning. Now for the positioning of the head, I like to try and align it to the mouth area of the reference model. So this gives you a nice center point to work from. So let's try and get it close to the mouth area, like this, something like that. Alright. Now if you look at the front of the object, you find that the eyes are aligned correctly, the nose is aligned correctly, and the mouth is kind of aligned correctly. You can also increase the scale of the head to try and get the chin area a bit better as well, like so that now you don't need to do too much of adjustments to the chin area as well. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the object I've done and show you one I've already prepared, which is this. And you can see that I've positioned the eyes, the nose, the mouth, etc. I've scaled the object and I've scaled it to the chin. Alright, if you look back at our mesh view, you'd find that the objects are aligned a bit better. You see the eyes, the nose and the mouth are more or less aligned. You don't really need to worry so much about the shoulder area because that's going to be covered in our retopology tools. Alright, now from here you need to export this object, and I like to take this object into mudbox to do some more finer tuning on the sculpt to try and match the eyes, the nose, the mouth, etc. a bit better. And then after I've done this in mudbox, then I retopologize using wrapit. Alright, so we're going to export this, and I'm going to call this object 0 before wrap. Alright, remember to change your scale of your object back to 1 from 10, so you don't get objects which are 10 times the size. And now we are ready to import the object into mudbox. Note that if you're using the same versions of 3D Studio Max and mudbox, that is mudbox 2017 and 3D Studio Max 2017, you can send the objects directly between the programs by using the send to function in 3D Studio Max. But because I'm using 2011 and 2017, it's not going to be possible to do so. So we go into mudbox. Let's import both these objects, and we have both objects in mudbox. Now you can see the object isn't completely aligned correctly. There are still some things that need to be positioned a bit better. So what I like to do here is to try and make the base object transparent so that I can see both objects when sculpting. So you go into paint tools, you select paintbrush, and you click on any of the meshes. This will ask you what type of paint layer you want to create. So select opacity, click OK. Now here, the darker the shade, the more transparent objects become. So I'd probably select a very dark gray color like this, and I'll also increase the size of the brush so that I can paint the entire object in one go. Alright, so if we start painting on the object, you find that the objects become transparent. Okay, cool. Now we have both the objects aligned, and you can make whatever adjustments you need to for your object, for your head object. So I'm just going to lock the reference model so that we don't accidentally edit that model, and I'm going to start working on sculpting the object that we've just prepared in 3D Studio Max. So if you look, you can see right away the eyes are not aligned correctly. There's still some positioning to be done on the nose. The mouth and chin area, etc. are not positioned 100% well. There's issues with the depth of the nose, etc. So when you're here, you can start working on these by using the grab tool under the sculpt tab. So I select grab. You can try and set the size of your grab brush based on how fine adjustments we need to do. For the eye area, I'm going to set it to about 2, and you can drag this down to try and match the eye area, like so. You can see the nose area is not aligned as well, so we can bring this up, try and match there, drag the nostrils out a bit. Alright, you can still work on the chin, the jaw, etc. Alright, to save some time, I've already done all the adjustments for you. So I'm just going to hide this object and I'm going to import the one that I've prepared. So if you look at this object, you'll see that the jaw has been aligned. I've aligned the chin. I've done alignments on the nose area, the bridge of the nose, the eyes, and I've positioned the ears directly on top of the ears of the reference model as well. I've moved the shoulders up to try and get the shape of his straps, and so now this object has been prepared for us to do a retopology using a wrap tool. So if I look at the object, it looks like this, and it's now prepared. You don't really need to worry about the height of the head, etc., because your retopology tools normally take care of this for you. Alright, as I said, you can use the send to option if you are using the same 3D Studio Max version as mudbox. You just say send selected as new scene, and it will appear in 3D Studio Max. But because I'm using 3D Studio Max 2011 to sculpt, I'll have to export this manually. So I'm going to export this to an object, and I'm going to call this object 0 mud, okay, which means it's been sculpted by mudbox, just for reference. Then I'm going to go back into 3D Studio Max, and now I'm just going to hide object 0 and I'm going to import the one we've just done, which is object 0 mud. Okay, so if you look at the object, you'll notice that if you look at the object, you'll find that it's aligned a lot better than when we started off in 3D Studio Max. The mouth, eyes, nose area, etc. looks aligned quite nicely, and now we are ready to do a wrap using wrapit, which will retopologize the object to match the base object. Now before I do that, instead of me doing a retopologize of the head, arm, chest, etc. separately, I like to do everything in one go. So I select the object, the head object, and now I'm going to attach these to the other objects as well. So let's just turn off the reference model so you can see the other objects. Okay, so now we've got the head, the chest, and the arms. I'm going to select element from the head, and Control A will select all the elements, and then thereafter I'm going to hit the attach button. So hit attach. It'll ask you if you want to match the material objects, blah blah blah. You don't really need to worry which option you select, doesn't really matter. I normally select do not match. Okay, so it's now joined to the chest and both the arms. So if I select all, this is now a single object. Alright, so now we are ready to do a retopologize using wrapit. So I'm going to turn on the reference model again. Okay, I have a shortcut key assigned for wrapit, so I'm just going to get wrapit started. Okay, so if I select the angle reference model like so, and I select high poly, you'll find that angle reference model is already been selected. So this is what we're going to use as our base. I'll say add. Now low reference model is the angle, is the recruit model that we've just joined. So we select this. Alright, so this will convert the entire object into an editable poly, and if there are any final adjustments that you need to do, you can use the slider here to turn the transparency off to see if your base model is assigned to your reference model. I think our alignment is fairly good. If you need to make any other adjustments, you can do it here, but I'm fairly happy with the way it looks. Alright, so now we are ready to do a retopologize. So let's take off the vertex view so we can see exactly what this looks like. And if we are happy, we select auto wrap, and this will now retopologize to match your base model. So let's select auto wrap. Alright, so now our model looks a lot more like our base model. You can compare again just to make sure. Alright, you'll find that there's a couple of artifacts here and there on the model, like there. You'll find that there are some edges which are a bit rough around the neck, shoulders, etc. So I normally like to hit the relax button, and the relax button will take care of any rough edges on the model for you and make it look a bit better. Just be wary about the number of times that you hit the relax button, because if you hit it too many times, it will make your model very smooth, so you lose a lot of detail on the model. So I'm going to hit relax all. Okay, you'll see that it smoothed off certain areas. There's still some areas which need some work, like around here, and you'll find the neck area and mouth area, etc., which also need a little bit more work to make it look a bit neater. But so far I'm fairly happy with the way it looks. If you look at the mouth area, you'll see that there's a couple of edges and stuff that's rough, but we're going to go back in the mudbox and fix that. Alright, if you're happy, you close wrapit, and now we need to detach the models again. So I'm going to turn off the reference model. Okay, another handy thing you can do is you'll find that sometimes there are holes in the model which could not be retopologized, and you can fix these using wrapit before we go into mudbox. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to detach the head object so that I can work with the head object alone and try and fix those holes that we've just come across. So I'm going to select the object, I'm going to select element, and I'm going to detach the objects again. So I'm going to detach. Okay, so now that the objects have been detached, I can work with the head object alone. So let's get out of that selection, and our object is called object 1. Okay, I'm going to turn on the reference model again, and I'm going to F8, which is my shortcut for wrapit, and I'm going to use angle reference as our model, and I'm going to select the head object, which is object 001. Okay, so now you'll notice that there are gaps in the model, and if you want to close these up, all you will need to do is turn on auto wrap. So auto wrap will ensure that your model will always take the shape of your base model, which you're using as reference. We can select these vertices here, and we can drag them to cover the hole. You'll find that the wrapit program will automatically wrap it to the base model's shape, and we'll do the same for this side. Cool. So if you look at the base model versus the model which we've just done, there are no holes, and you can do the same for the back if there are any holes in the back, but this looks fine. Alright, so now that we're happy with the model that we've retopologized, I'm going to export this model into mudbox just to neaten up all of the edges and make it look a bit better. So let's export this. I'm going to export this as object 0 wrap, and I'm going to import this into mudbox. Alright, so if you go back to mudbox, I'm going to turn off the object we've just imported. I'm going to keep the reference model so I can see if there's any fine adjustments that I need to make on the retopologized model we've just done. So if you go into layers, you have paint selected, you turn off paint layer, and then the opacity of the model will go back to normal. I'm just going to unlock this, and I'm going to move this object slightly so I can compare the wrap that I've done with the retopologized model. Okay, so if I select this object and I select translate, okay, and I'm just going to drag it a little bit to the left, and now I'm going to import the object we've just done, which is object 0 wrap. Okay, and we have the reference model right next to the model we've just done. I'm just going to rotate this slightly so you can see both head objects nicely, and I'm just going to lock that object as well so we don't mess with this, and I'm going to select the object we've just done. Okay, so now I'm going to go into my sculpting tools and I'm going to select the smooth brush. Now you'll notice there's certain areas of the face that are still a bit rough, like if you look around the mouth area, around the nose area, etc. And I want to neaten this up a bit more. So I'm going to select the smooth brush. I'm going to select a value of around 2. 2 should be okay. And you just smooth areas that don't look very neat. So maybe around the nose, around the eyes especially. Looking much better already. Now don't overdo it with the smoothing as well, because you'll find that you tend to lose some detail on the face. So you want to just do a little bit of smoothing just to make the object look neat. The chin area and the neck area especially need a little bit of smoothing as well. So like so. It's okay. Let's make it a bit better around the ears as well. Right, cool. So this has been prepared. Now you can also make any other finer adjustments on this model before we take it back into 3D Studio Max. So for instance, if you want to make the eye smaller, you want to make the mouth a little bit bigger, because if you look at the reference model, the width of the mouth is a little bit bigger than here. So we can select our grab tool, you can select a value of around 2, and you can make the mouth wider if you need to. You can adjust the eye size, etc. Alright, so now that this model has been smoothed and it looks fairly close to what we want it to look like, we can export this into 3D Studio Max, and we can export it from 3D Studio Max for preparation for injection into X-Ray. The reason why I'm going to import it back into 3D Studio Max is because we want to also export the vertex normals, and you can only do this using the scripts I've created in 3D Studio Max. So we make whatever adjustments we want here before we do that. Alright, so I'm just going to open one that I've prepared, and I've smoothed it already, so you can see what the final sculpt looks like, which is this model. Alright, so before we get into 3D Studio Max, there's a few things I want to show you that will help you to detail the face when you are creating your textures. So I'm going to go into Paint Tools. I'm going to select Paintbrush, and now I'm going to start painting another layer. So let's go into our paint layers. I'm going to say New Layer, and I'm going to select Diffuse. Okay, so now we are going to start painting details onto the face. Now you can use a paintbrush, you can use a spray, pencil, whatever you want. For instance, if I want to detail the outline of the mouth, that's too big. Let's make it 0.5, and let's use the airbrush option. Alright, so you can detail where the edges of the mouth are, like that. Let's increase the strength a bit so we can see. Alright, so you can detail the outlines of the mouth, where the lips should end. You can detail some face lines, etc. on the face. This will help not only with your texture creation but also your normal map creation. You can give a guide as to where your eyebrow should be, like so. Alright, and when you're happy with the amount of detail that you've done on the face, you right click on the layer and you could export the selected object. Call this face outline, and I'm going to import it into my texture at a later stage. Alright, now that you have an outline done as to where the details on the face are completed, I'm also going to show you how to create a ambient occlusion map, which is going to control the way the reflections in the game work. So let's select this object, which is this object here. We're going to go into UVZ maps, extract texture maps, and we can select new operation. From here I'm going to select ambient occlusion map. Okay, now this will ask you what your base model are, what your target models are, etc. So I'm going to click on add selected for the target models. For the source model, I'm also going to select add selected. For the size, I'm going to select 1024 by 1024, and you need to give a base file name. which I'm going to call AO. Okay, it's going to save it as a PNG file, which is fine. And you hit extract, and you wait for mudbox to process the AO map. Okay, cool. The map has been extracted, and if you look at the object again, you'll find that now you can see reflections on the model, which look fairly accurate. If I look at the AO map that has been created, it looks like so. You can clean up the edges around the ears and the eyes and etc., but this really makes this will really control the reflections of your model in game, making it look much more like the person you are trying to create. Alright, so now we've created face detail, and we also created an AO map. So we're pretty much done with mudbox for the time being, and I'm going to import this back into 3D Studio Max. So let's import that one we've just done. Okay, so let's import object 0 mud smooth. Okay, so if you look at the model, it looks fairly okay, nothing really rough about it or anything that needs to be fixed. With the object selected, I'm going to say max script run script, and I'm going to select take and export wavefront.ms file, which is the max script I've created, and this is going to now export our model with the normals as well. So you hit object 0 mud smooth normals and you hit save. Okay, I've done it for you already, so I'm not going to save it. And now we are ready to import this model into your model that you've just created. Alright, so let's open our model in X-Ray, and I'm going to import the one we've just done, which is the mud smooth normals file. I say yes when you that you want to import the animation meshes. Okay, and then also let's turn off the other animations that we don't need, which is remove facial expressions excluding face under the utilities menu. Okay, cool. So this is going to turn off the facial animations for the eyes, the eyelids, etc., which I don't normally work on. So we can also export the chest and the arms, etc., that we've just done. Now you'll notice that the chest object also has some artifacts that you need to fix. I'm not going to go into detail on how to do this. You can use the same process I've just used with mudbox to try and smooth this area out and make it look a bit better. Okay, but we're going to save time by not doing that. So after exporting these objects, you can import these back into X-Ray, like I've done here. Okay, now that your model is prepared, you find that you need to also do positioning of the eye objects. You need to sculpt object 16 and object 12 to try and take the new position of the eyes, and you also need to position the bones of the object so that the eye bones and the bones for the mouth, tongue, etc. are positioned to where you want it to be for the model. So I'm not going to go into too much of detail on that because I've covered positioning of bones in one of my other tutorials, and you can look this up if you need to. One tip for positioning the mouth, the teeth and the tongue is to try and move all three objects together, and you'll find that an object which controls the shading of that area has the same shape of the mouth with an opening. So I like to try and position these to match the mouth area. So if I just show you quickly. Alright, so I have imported the mouth, jaw, etc. I'm just going to make this see-through so you can see how I position these. So if I make it see-through, you can see that the positioning of the mouth, etc. is based on the opening of this object, which provides a shading, this big black object here. You can see that it matches the opening of the mouth. I normally like to move the tongue, mouth, teeth and the mouth cavity object all together at once and position these accordingly. Alright, and then obviously you need to position the bones to fit where the new position of the tongue and the eyes are, which I'm not going to go into. Alright, so now we are fairly happy with the way the object looks and where the model looks. We've imported this into X-Ray, so I'm going to proceed with creating facial animations using mudbox. A lot of people have requested a tutorial on this, so I'm just going to show you how to do this quickly. Alright, so let's go back to mudbox. We have our object which has been created. I'm going to turn off the reference model because we don't really need that anymore. Alright, so I'm just going to show you how to create one or two expressions quickly. The process is fairly simple with mudbox. The way in which I work is I like to utilize the source model for reference when positioning the mouth open expressions, because this will give you an idea of how much you need to open the mouth of the object, and this has probably been the most important animation that the model uses to determine how much to open the mouth. Alright, so I'm going to open up the recruit model, and I'm going to use animation option, which is Control A, and I'm going to look at animation. It's around 45 to 47 or so. Okay, 47, there we go. I'm going to export this object 47. I'm going to leave it named animation underscore 47, and I'm going to import this into mudbox as a reference. So let's import this. Right, and we can position this as we need. I'm just going to turn off the opacity layer again. Let's turn this on so we can see both objects simultaneously, and I'm going to just move this object to position the eyes correctly so that I have something for reference. So let's go into select move tools, and I'm going to move the recruit animation 47 model to position the eyes with the base model we just done, like so. Alright, so I'm going to lock animation 47 of the recruit model, and I'm going to select the object that we've just created. Alright, and I'm going to go into layers, and I'm going to select sculpt layers, and now these are the different sculpt layers for the head object. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say new layer. I'm going to call this animation 47 for my reference, and now we can start positioning the model as we need. So I'm going to go into sculpt tools, I'm going to grab, and I'm going to select size of 10 because I want to move the entire jaw. So I can move this jaw down, so there, and we can open the mouth by setting a smaller value, 1, and we can move the mouth area up to open it up. Zoom in a bit more. Okay, so we want to try and get the mouth object positioned to the same place as the reference model, so let's increase the size a bit more. So 3, increase too big, 2. Right, like so, we have the object more or less positioned to where we want it to be. So about there. Alright, now this mouth expression looks terrifying. So in order to make it look a bit neater, we can use a smooth brush, and we can just smooth this out a bit better, like so. Okay, and we can use a grab brush again to try and get the expression looking more realistic, like so. Alright, you'll find also that the jaw is a little bit out of place because his jaw is much farther back. So we can set the grab brush to about 10 again. and we can use the grab brush and move the jaw back slightly as well. So now we have a proper mouth open expression done. Hide the reference model again. And we can do some fine adjustments on this model if you need to. Let's increase this a bit better. Make this 2. Drag the edges in a bit. Okay, so now that looks a little bit better. Smooth it out a little bit more. Alright, cool. So we have one expression being created. Now if you need to utilize another expression from this file, for instance, if we look at animation 47 and then we look at animation 50, where the mouth is open but it's not as much open, you can duplicate this layer and we turn off 47 and we can name this 50. Turn on 50 and we can reduce the strength of the morph to try and decrease the amount that the mouth has been open. So let's make it 70%, and you see that the mouth isn't as open as much. So now we've created 2 facial expressions using the one object. So if you need to export these, you can either use the send to 3D Studio Max option like I've done before, and you can send this to 3D Studio Max as morph targets, or you can export each of these objects individually. So if you want to export this, you click on File, Export Selection, and it will export the object. You can name this NM50, and you can inject this back into X-Ray as you need to do so. Okay, you can create as many layers as you need for each of the expressions. For instance, we can create a new layer and we can use this for a smiling expression. Let's use a grab brush and we can make the object smile if we need to, etc. And you can export these as needed. Once you are done with the animations, you can import each one by one back into X-Ray, or you can import them all using the inject all animations function. But let's remember they need to be named with the anim underscore prefix. Alright, so this is basically how you would create the animations for your model. And once you're done with the animations for the model, you are pretty much prepared to take the model back into game. Alright, now that we have our model prepared, I'm going to show you guys quickly how I utilize textures from older games on the models that I'm creating for the PC version. Now the main difference between textures from older games is that they use diffuse textures, whereas the new PC game uses PBR textures. And PBR textures basically are textures where all the lighting from the texture has been removed. So you can see a texture that I've created here, which is utilizing the texture from the 2007 Kurt Angle model, and the other textures are textures that I've taken from other models in the game. Now this is what the original 2007 model texture looks like, and I normally like to increase the resolution of these textures before using them in game, so that you don't get any blurriness on the texture. So I normally open the texture up in Photoshop. I have the Alien Skin Blow Up filter, which I've purchased, and this allows you to rescale, to resize the object without too much of distortion on the picture. So now the object is 1024. I'm going to make it 2048, and I don't really need to do much sharpening or much grain because the object is fairly high resolution as it is, and this will double the size of the texture without too much of loss of quality. So now that I have a high resolution texture, I can start editing this. Now I prefer to work with Fireworks when doing my edits rather than Photoshop. That's a personal preference. You can do your edits in Photoshop if you'd like. Right, so if I go into Fireworks, you can see that I've imported the texture that I've just created in Photoshop, and I've positioned it and scaled it to a base texture which I have. Now immediately you'll see that this has a lot of light and reflections on it, and you look at the rest of the texture, this is a PBR texture without any light or reflections on it. So the way in which I get rid of the light on this texture is I use a brightness and contrast filter, and I turn the brightness down and I turn the contrast down. So immediately that makes the texture a lot darker, and by adjusting the contrast you are able to filter out a lot of the light. Okay, do the same for this. And once I've done this, I then adjust the hue and saturation to try and give it a little bit more color, and to also take out more of the reflections. So if I select hue and saturation, I increase the color, increase the saturation of the color, and I also increase the lightness. So the lightness really helps to get rid of the reflections, like so, and you find that it blends a lot better with the rest of the texture. Do the same here. Okay, cool. Now that I've taken out most of the reflections and lighting from this texture, we are ready to use this texture in game. If you just want to double check that you've got all the facial details and that your texture is actually positioned correctly, you can import the detail file that you've created in mudbox, where I drew the lines on the face. So if I look at the texture that I created in mudbox, this will show you more or less where the eye lines need to be, where the outer parts of the lip need to be, the lines around the nose and the mouth, etc. And you can see that the lines are fairly aligned. I've made some adjustments to the eyebrows and the chin area, etc. Some of these lines I will utilize when creating the normal maps, etc. But I'm fairly happy with the way it's positioned. So now we are ready to export this texture and import it back into our game. So this was a fairly quick tutorial on the process that I used to sculpt my models from beginning to end using 3D Studio Max and mudbox. I hope that it's been helpful to you, and I hope that it will help to improve the mods that you produce. I know that I've covered quite a bit of material fairly quickly through this tutorial, but it is a fairly advanced tutorial, so I would recommend you watch it a few times until you get familiar with the concepts that I've discussed. And if you have any questions or anything you need to know, post in the comments and suggestions below, or in my X-Packer X-Ray thread. Thank you very much, and happy modding.